After she had gathered her firewood and was about to lift it onto her head, she suddenly felt a tap on her shoulder. Turning, a leaf was held under her nose, and the next thing she knew, everything went dark. Once upon a time, in a dazzling kingdom called Amago, there was a place of beauty, perched high on a hill, surrounded by shimmering waters. The people of Amago were expert fishermen who glided through water as if they were part of it. Their laughter and joy filled the air, and they loved each other deeply, sharing everything they had. In this wonderful village lived a woman named Ezinne. She was as lovely in spirit as she was in appearance, known throughout the village for her incredible kindness. No one should ever feel alone, she often said, and she truly lived by those words. Whether someone was sick, sad, or in need, Ezinne was there with a comforting smile and a helping hand. Her heart was big enough to love everyone, and this love came back to her in 100-fold. Ezinne was once a single lady, admired by all for her warmth and generosity. But she gave her heart to a man named Ogbonnaya, who became her husband. Together, they had a daughter. But after so many years, despite their hopes, no more children followed. Ogbonnaya became unhappy. He would have felt much better if they had a son instead of a daughter. In Amago, just like in many old places in Africa, male children were often seen as essential to carry on a family's name. Ogbonnaya, holding to these beliefs, felt a heavy burden. After waiting 5 years with no sign of another child, he said to Ezinne with a heavy heart, "My love, I think it's time we face our reality." Feeling the weight of tradition, Ogbonnaya chose to marry another wife in hopes of having a son. Ezinne, though heartbroken, continued to pour her love into her daughter and her village. Her kindness did not waver, and her daughter grew under her care, learning the beauty of generosity and the strength of a kind heart. Despite the challenges, Ezinne's spirit remained unbroken, shining like a beacon in the beautiful kingdom of Amago. Ezinne was a very hard-working woman. Every day, she would travel to a neighboring town to sell fish. The money she made from selling fish helped her take care of her daughter, Dinmma. Even though her husband didn't pay much attention to her anymore, Ezinne kept working with a smile, making sure Dinmma had everything she needed. Dinmma was just like her mother, both in her smile and her big heart. She was loved by everyone in the village. People were always giving her little presents because they adored how kind she was. And she always helped her mom. At just 13 years old, Dinmma was already a big help at the market. With her bright eyes sparkling, she would shout with all her might, "Buy fish!" Her cheerful voice drew people to their stall. Dinmma's joy and eagerness made everyone around her smile. She truly was a delightful soul, spreading happiness just like her mother. In the village, there was only one school nearby, and parents who could afford it made sure their children attended. Dinmma, known for her dreams as vast as the sky and loved by everyone in the village, was no exception. Her mother Ezinne was determined to show everyone, especially Ogbonna, that girls could achieve great things too. Filled with resolve, Ezinne decided to send Dinmma to school, aiming to see her become a highly successful woman someday. Dinmma was not just a dreamer, but also very intelligent, making her mother's goal seem well within reach. Dinmma's closest friend was Amaka. They had been friends since they were little, growing up side by side like two peas in a pod. They were practically inseparable, always together, whether they were fetching firewood, collecting water, or washing clothes. If you were looking for one, you just had to find the other. They were that close. Together, they shared not only chores but countless dreams and secrets, supporting each other in every step of their journey. Things began changing between the two girls when Dinmma noticed that her friend Amaka had eyes on her childhood crush, Emeka. Emeka and Dinmma's mother were very close friends, and it extended to their children. Emeka was good looking and so nice to Dinmma. He took care of Dinmma as if she was his little sister. But unknown to him, Dinmma had strong feelings for him. At night, she would envision both of them getting married, living like happy couples and having beautiful children. She had mentioned it to Amaka and couldn't help it when she noticed Amaka also liked her Emeka. She confronted her, and Amaka couldn't deny it. Dinmma felt hurt and betrayed, and then their friendship started growing apart. She never wanted to be where Amaka was. They totally stopped speaking to each other. One sunny day, all the village children, including Amaka and Dinmma, went to the forest to gather firewood. The forest was a bit spooky and not safe for just one person. Everyone felt braver together. There was a bit of tension because Amaka and Dinmma weren't speaking to each other. As they walked, a girl came up to Dinmma and asked, "Is it true that you took Amaka's boyfriend?" Dinmma looked really surprised and said, "Me? Who told you that?" "I heard Amaka telling the other girls under the tree after school yesterday," the girl replied. Feeling really upset, Dinmma marched right up to Amaka and pushed her aside. "Amaka, why are you saying I took your boyfriend? You know the truth. Is this who you are?" "What are you talking about?" Amaka snapped back, her face filled with anger. The other children started to clap and chant, excited by the drama. They even began cutting thin branches to use as whips, hoping for a fight. This was something the village children found thrilling. Dinmma continued, "Why pretend you don't know? I see how you act around him, changing your voice and the way you look at him. I didn't think you could be so mean." The kids around them cheered for Dinmma, pushing Amaka to respond. "You are a coward, Dinmma. You liked Emeka but never told him. I was brave enough to do it. Why are you upset?" Unable to hold back any longer, Dinmma shoved Amaka, and the two started fighting. It was a fierce fight, surprising for two best friends, over just a boy. When the fight got really serious, the other children stopped wiping and pulled them apart, realizing things were getting out of hand. Still angry, Dinmma grabbed her cutlass and stormed off to another part of the forest. The other children called after her, worried because it's dangerous to be alone in the forest, but she didn't listen. After she had gathered her firewood and was about to lift it onto her head, she suddenly felt a tap on her shoulder. Turning, a leaf was held under her nose, and the next thing she knew, everything went dark. Everyone was back home from fetching firewood, but Dinmma was nowhere to be found. The village children didn't really mind, as they were still carried away by the fights that happened in the forest. Those who were envious of the friendship between Dinmma and Amaka were very much interested in circulating this story throughout the village and ensuring everyone heard it. In fact, it was the hottest topic in the village that evening. When Ezinne, Dinmma's mother, returned from the market, the house was locked and Dinmma was nowhere to be found. This got her worried. Dinmma never stayed out late. She decided to check at Amaka's house to see if Dinmma was there. But getting there, Amaka told her Dinmma didn't fetch firewood together with them. She had gone her separate way after they had a fight in the forest. Ezinne's heart began to pound. She went from house to house like a mad woman, asking if anyone had seen Dinmma, with Amaka behind her, who was panicking. Amaka was scared and almost shaking. Even though she had had a fight with Dinmma, she still loved her very much. It became very dark, yet no one had seen Dinmma. Ezinne cried and cried. My eyes, my only eyes have been taken away from me. What do I do? What if she has been eaten up by wild animals? Emeka and Amaka's mother held her, consoling her. Amaka was also crying. She blamed herself for everything that happened. If only they hadn't had that fight. Please, come back and take Emeka, she cried. The night was really a long one for Ezinne and her friends. By the next morning, the villagers gathered together and set out for the forest to find Dinmma or her remains. She was popular and everyone loved her so much. After a long search, they arrived at a spot where they found her machete, scarf and slippers, but no trace of her. It was a dark day in the kingdom of Amago, and everyone mourned her. Ezinne cried so much and refused to be consoled, while Amaka blamed herself for all that had happened. Meanwhile, Dinmma opened her eyes to find herself locked up in a dark room with chains on her hands and legs. She didn't know how she got there. She called her mom, but no one answered. Then she began to recall her fight in the forest, how she left her friends and went her way to fetch firewood in the forest out of anger. She remembered how she had felt a tap on her shoulder, and from there, she didn't know what else happened. She began to scream at the top of her voice, and soon the door opened. A very hefty man entered. You're finally awake, he said. His voice was soft. Please, where am I? She asked, her voice shaking. Dinmma has been taken by the people of Agba. Agba was a very large and wealthy kingdom, far away from the humble hills of Amago. Long ago, a fierce war had raged between Agba and Amago, during which warriors from Amago had stormed into Agba under the cover of the night, resulting in the beheading of the Agba's king. Although they made peace after a new king was installed, until King Obidi came into power. When King Obidi rose to power in Oba, he was nothing like the kings before him. He was harsh and cruel, with no sympathy for anyone. Under his rule, life became harder for his people. He demanded higher tributes each month, deepening the suffering of the people. Even when the villagers cried out in agony, he turned a deaf ear, punishing those who dared to speak against him severely. His name alone was enough to send shivers through the kingdom, and he ruled without counsel from anyone. King Obidi took away people's land forcefully, and any woman that caught his attention became his wife. To say he was just wicked was an understatement. King Obidi was very powerful and unforgiving. He felt his fathers had been weak and had decided to toe a different path. Driven by a relentless desire to be a king, unmatched in power and feared by all, he felt he needed even greater strength to fulfill his vision of being fearless and unbeatable. His quest for power led him to a distant land, where he acquired a fearsome blood-sucking deity named Nengo. He built a formidable shrine to house this dark force, ensuring its influence would permeate his reign. Nengo, a deity of terrifying might, chose Nwude, a man known for his heartlessness, to serve as its priest. This union between deity and priest cast a shadow over the kingdom. King Obidi commanded that all villagers must make monthly offerings to Nengo, and to sustain his own magical powers, he ensured he made a sacrifice of a virgin each year. Under the sway of Nengo, King Obidi's rule grew even more unforgiving and merciless. He was drunk with power. He revisited the history of his kingdom, identifying all the lands previously lost in wars with neighboring kingdoms. Convinced that his predecessors had shown weakness, he resolved with a ruthless determination to take back everything and more that belonged to the kingdom. He waged war against these kingdoms, reclaiming territories once lost. His success in these battles only increased his infamy, making his name a terror and a symbol of relentless vengeance. To renew his power, every year he offered a virgin girl as sacrifice to the gods. In these sacrifices, virgins were taken as captives from kingdoms that he had felt wronged their land in time past. This time around, it was time for Amagu to pay for their sins. Hence, he took Dinmma from Amagu kingdom, alongside another girl from another kingdom. Amagu kingdom didn't know that Dinmma was kidnapped by the people of Oba. These virgins were to be sacrificed to his deity. Among the captured, King Obidi chose Dinmma for a fate even more daunting than sacrifice. He decided that she would not be killed, but instead would live as an Usu, a permanent servant to the deity. This meant Dinmma would have to remain a virgin and serve Nengo for the rest of her life. A life she would have to lead completely isolated from others. As an Osu, Dinmma was excommunicated from the community, forced to live apart, her presence considered a risk of spiritual contamination. She was to remain a virgin and serve the deity all her life against her wish. And if she was ever defiled, she would be stoned to death. This was meant to preserve her sacredness and avoid spiritual contamination. The guard came out to inform the king that Dinmma was awake. "Have you checked if she's intact and has never been touched?" the king asked. "Yes, your majesty," he responded, bowing slightly. The king smiled wickedly. "Inform the chief priest. Let him prepare for the dedication ritual in 7 days." Back in Amagu, Ezine was surrounded with friends and well-wishers. It was very difficult, but the villagers were supportive. Her husband Ogbonnaya was also supportive. They believed she may have been eaten up by wild animals and buried the items found in replacement of her, as it was the custom of the land. Day and night, Dinmma cried. She regretted so many things and wished she could go back to her mother. She had refused to eat or drink, even when the guard had forced and beaten her up. All she wanted was to go home. On the evening of the 7th day, she was brought out. A woman cleaned and dressed her up. She was also forced to eat, and then they took her out for the ritual. Dinmma cried at the realization of what was happening. She was going to become an Osu, a servant to the deity of King Obidi. After the dedication ritual, she was to move into the shrine hut. Her spirit was shattered as realization dawned on her. She didn't think anyone would ever come looking for her, as she was going to be stuck here forever. After her dedication, she began living with Nwude, the village chief priest, chosen by Nengo. He was a mean old man and made life miserable for Dinmma. Nwude hated children with passion. No one could tell why. He was not married, and he never cared to have children. He treated them with so much displeasure, as if they were plagues. Dinmma saw hell in his hands. He was always shouting at the top of his voice and scolding her for no just reason. He was evil and a bitter man. Severally, Dinmma had tried to escape. She couldn't bear the hard life she was living, and life in the shrine was disgusting to her. The worst of it was eating food offered to the deity. That was what they lived on. But each time she tried to escape, she found her way back to the shrine. She was bound by the powers of Nengo, the powerful deity of King Obidi, who strikes without mercy, and there was no way she could escape. After several years of trying, she gave up and decided to embrace her fate. All her beautiful childhood dreams, hopes, had been lost to the cruel fates binding her to the powerful deity of the land, Nengo. Years passed, and Dinmma blossomed into a beautiful woman. Nwude never failed to remind her daily how hot-tempered Nengo the deity was, and how he wouldn't hesitate to strike her down once she defiled herself. Her daily escape was when she would sit on the mountain and just watch the lush green vegetation. It reminded her so much of her wonderful dreams as a child. She would think of her mother. She really hoped she was still alive, as she knew her mother would be so heartbroken. Then she would think of her friend Amaka. She guessed Amaka would be married to Emeka by now. These thoughts brought down tears from her eyes. Her childhood and dreams were stolen away from her, and she was so bitter towards the land of Oba. One evening, she was on the mountain, lost in her thoughts. when she saw a very tall figure approach her. She was horrified. She had never seen any human on that mountain for many years. But as the figure came closer, it revealed a very handsome man, dressed in a royal regalia. She stood up abruptly. She had never seen him before. He smiled at her when he came closer, wondering what a pretty woman like her was doing all alone on the mountain. As he opened his mouth to exchange pleasantries with her, Dinmma sped off. She ran as fast as her leg could carry her, till she got to the shrine. She had been warned to stay very far away from any man. The young man was Ugonna, the son of King Obidi. Ugonna had been away in the white man's land, studying for many years, because his father wanted him to learn new things to help their kingdom. He had just returned back home. Ever since he was little, Ugonna had loved nature, just like Dinmma. He used to sit on the mountains and look at trees and plants. He had missed his spot so much and was surprised to find a beautiful maiden there. But as he sat on the mountain, he couldn't stop thinking about the young maiden he just saw. She was so pretty, but something was just not right with her. He saw the deep sadness in her eyes and longed to speak with her. For days, Dinmma didn't go to the mountains. She was scared of meeting the strange man again, but she hated the life in the shrine so badly. She hated hearing Nwude's wicked laughter and the smell of the incense. Even after 10 years, she could never get used to this life she had been forced into. Her worst days were the days people came to offer sacrifices, and Nwude would accuse her of stealing the things that belonged to the gods while raining curses on her. She didn't understand why Nwude was so mean. Dinmma had always loved the mountains. They were her special place to escape from everything. One evening, she decided to go back, craving the peace that the mountains brought her. That evening, she ran into Prince Ugonna again, but this time, he gently asked her to stay. "I'm never going to harm you," he assured her in a calm, soothing voice. Dinmma felt a wave of relief and decided to sit beside him. Together, they watched the mountains in a comfortable silence. When Dinmma left the mountain that evening, she realized it was the best conversation she had had in a long time, even though they hadn't spoken a single word. There was something magical about that evening. For the first time in a while, she felt protected, as if she finally had someone on her side. It made her incredibly happy, lighting up her heart with a joy she hadn't felt in ages. As days turned into weeks, she found herself always longing to go to the mountains to see this handsome stranger. On the days she would have activities in the shrine, she would feel so sad. The prince also looked forward to seeing Dinmma's beautiful face. Soon, they started talking and the prince told her how much he enjoyed nature. It gave him peace, far away from the palace ruled by his wicked father. It made him feel he was in a world where love dwelled, and it calmed his soul so much. Dinmma realized they both wanted the same things, and the mountain was their escape from the things that haunted their souls. As days turned into weeks, Dinmma and Prince Ugonna found themselves unexpectedly falling in love. Dinmma knew she wasn't supposed to love anyone. Her life as an Osu forbade it. But after 10 lonely years, she found joy in Ugonna's company and was willing to risk everything, even if it was just for a moment of happiness. What else am I living for? She thought to herself. She kept her true identity a secret from the prince, fearing that revealing she was an Osu might make her lose him. Whenever Ugonna asked her personal questions, she skillfully changed the subject. All he knew was that she was an orphan living in the Oba kingdom. Ugo was so enchanted by Dinmma that he promised he would marry her. Excited by the news, his mother, the queen, couldn't wait to meet the woman who had won her son's heart when he told his mother about Dinmma. However, when Ugonna invited Dinmma to the palace, she politely declined. Dinmma knew that stepping into the palace would end disastrously for her. As an Osu, she was forbidden to love, especially someone as high-ranking as the prince. Realizing the danger and hopelessness of their situation, Dinmma made a heartbreaking decision. She stopped visiting the mountains, hoping that if she stayed away, Ugonna would eventually forget her and move on with his life. It was a painful choice to protect them both from inevitable tragedy. For days, the prince didn't set eyes on Dinmma. He didn't know her real name and couldn't find any trace of her. When he asked about her, for weeks, he searched endlessly for her. He was heartbroken that he couldn't find the woman he had fallen deeply in love with. Dinmma cried herself to sleep every night. She was caged in a life where she couldn't experience freedom. She missed the prince daily, but knew that it would be terrible if anyone found out who she was. One day, while Dinmma was collecting firewood in the bush along the path that led to the mountain, fate intervened. Prince Ugonna, still clinging to hope, was on his way to the mountain, the place where he had last felt close to her. He hoped to see her or find a trail that might lead to her whereabouts. He had felt she was avoiding him for some reasons and decided to trace her home. When she finally arrived and stopped at the shrine, Prince Ugonna was shocked. Does it mean that Dinmma lived in the shrine? Could she be an Osu, he thought to himself. His whole body shook as realization dawned on him. Dinmma was not the girl he thought she was. Hey besties, if you're yet to subscribe to this channel, don't skip this video without subscribing as we bring you the part 2 of this amazing story. Stay tuned and watch out.